Hey everyone, well good evening. This is today's homework on 11.3 quadrilaterals, page 425. There we go, right there. All right, so just a reminder, you do have a quiz tomorrow over the classifying triangles and quadrilaterals, so be ready. All right, so to classify quadrilaterals in many ways is possible. So write the quadrilateral, parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, square, or trapezoid. All right, we said that a quadrilateral has 4 sides. Parallelogram has 2 sets of, and remember we had the abbreviation of parallel lines. A rectangle and a rhombus. A square is like a rhombus, as a square is like a rectangle. And then the trapezoid runs solo, has only one set of parallel lines. And I'm going to put the double L's. All right, we did this in class, so those of you that didn't write it down, we did it together. We did the first 6 together. So we said that this rhombus looks like a diamond. We don't use the word diamond anymore. It's rhombus, but it is a quadrilateral, so I'm going to write the word quadrilateral. It's also a parallelogram because it has one set, and I'm going to get a different color pen, and it has, because this one has 2 sets of parallel lines, and so this makes it a parallelogram. It's almost like pair of, so you can think 2 sets. So parallelogram, not gram, but gram. Okay. Then we also said that this parallelogram is also like a rectangle. This is also a rhombus. And I could have done it the other way, showing that it's also a square. A square is like a rectangle, as a square is like a rhombus, all right? But a rectangle is not a square, but a square is like a rectangle. Number 2, we did this together. We said that it had 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, which makes it a quadrilateral. And then the other one, it is not a parallelogram because it only has 1 set of parallel lines. It's not a rectangle, it's not a rhombus, it's not a square, but it is a trapezoid. All right. This one right here, we just said it was a quadrilateral. It's nothing else. There are no parallel lines here, so it's not a parallelogram. It's not a rectangle. It doesn't fit the characteristics of a rectangle. It's not a rhombus. It's not a square, nor is it a trapezoid. So it is just a quadrilateral. We'll take a look at this one here. Well, this is 4 sides, so this is a quadrilateral. This quadrilateral has 1 set of parallel lines, 2 sets of parallel lines, so it makes it a parallelogram. This is also a rectangle. Okay, and remember, a rectangle is not like a square, but a square has the characteristics of a rectangle. All right, then let's take a look at this one. This one is a parallelogram. It has 1 set of parallel lines, 2 sets of parallel lines, so it makes it a parallelogram. And it's also a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. Looking at this one right here, this is a quadrilateral. It has 4 sides. It has 1 set, 2 sets of parallel lines, which makes it a parallelogram. And this also is a rhombus. And on this one right here, this particular rhombus, there's not right angles if you take a look here. So if you're curious on why, so if somebody, I can hear somebody say, but it's also like a square. No, if you look at here, this particular rhombus has right angles, which the square is like a rhombus with the right angles and all sides are equal. Whereas this one here has two acute and two obtuse. So it's just a rhombus. Okay, so we were looking at the rest. Brooke draws quadrilaterals on a canvas in her art class. Is it possible for Brooke to draw a parallelogram that is not a rectangle? Okay, so is it possible? So she draws quadrilaterals on a canvas in her art class. Is it possible for Brooke to draw a parallelogram that is not a rectangle? And absolutely, the answer is yes. Because one way, so I want you to think about it and then draw it out, but she can draw a quadrilateral, which is a four-sided figure, with opposite sides that are congruent and parallel. So looking above here, our parallelogram is also quadrilateral, but it is not a rectangle. So she can do it. So she can draw a quadrilateral with opposite sides that are congruent. Which is the same up here. Are these opposite sides equal to each other? Yes, they are. And parallel. And so looking at this parallelogram, we have two sets of parallel lines with no right angles. Do you see any right angles in this parallelogram? No. You see obtuse and acute angles. And so if you couldn't see that, sorry about that. Let me bring it there. All right. Is it possible for Brooke to draw a square and a rhombus that are congruent? Of course it is. Yes, it is possible to draw a square and a rhombus that are congruent. So here, a square is always a rhombus. So she can draw two congruent squares and classify them as a square and a rhombus. So a square is a rhombus. So she can draw two congruent squares and classify one as a square and one as a rhombus. So if I drew so just pretend like I drew those equal, right? So they all have right angles. So now if I flip this one here, is that a rhombus? This is still a right angle, right angle, right angle, right angle. So I have a square and a rhombus. This one I kind of made too long, made it a little rectangle, so I have to do it this way. So just be careful when you're drawing two identical squares. All right. I'm going to move on to this one. My custodian is starting to vacuum, so I want to make sure that you can still hear me. Which statement is true about the two figures? Okay, so this is a square, and this is a rectangle. They have a different, I'm sorry about that. They have a different number of right angles. Is that true? No. This has 4 right angles, and this has 4 right angles. And so that's not a true statement. They are not congruent. Is that true? That's absolutely right. Because if this is congruent to this side, which is congruent, so on a square, all sides are congruent. On a rectangle, you have this one that's congruent to this one, and this is congruent to this one, so they are not congruent. That's a true statement right there. Which of the following is a regular polygon? Regular polygon, remember that we said that a regular polygon, that all sides are congruent, all angles are congruent, all sides and angles are congruent. So that'll make it a square. So if you look up here at our square, all sides are congruent and all sides have right angles, and those are all equal to each other. And then this multi-step problem, Tim cuts out paper quadrilaterals like the one below to use in an art project. If he cuts the quadrilateral in half, which quadrilateral results from the cut? So if I cut this in half, what am I going to get? Well, let's take a look. So here I'm going to have one trapezoid, and here I have another. So I'm going to have 2 trapezoids. Okay, that's it for tonight. I hope you have a great night. I hope you can hear this part. Thanks and bye.